Oh, good afternoon, everybody. It's such a beautiful day. I can't force myself to go inside and sit at the typewriter. So I'm going to record a few thoughts about the painting of the week for next Thursday. And we're going to look at George Seurat's painting, Bathers at Asnieres. It was painted in 1884 with a huge amount of ambition and optimism. George Seurat was born in 1859, which makes him exactly 6 years older than Vincent van Gogh, and in fact 20 years older than Cézanne. And he was the only one of the entire group of painters who were called the New Painters, who actually got into the École des Beaux-Arts. And his drawings will show that, this marvelous, solid luminosity of his drawings. So he was younger than the others. He did exhibit with the Impressionists, and this painting was exhibited in the last Impressionist exhibition in 1884. So it's an enormous painting. It is more than 6 feet by more than 9 feet. I suppose it's about 7.5 feet by 10.5 feet. And I do wonder where he got the money from to buy the canvas, because he was nothing if not very poor. And as a young man of 24, he was a man of his time. He believed in science, he believed in the camera, and he wanted to find scientific ways of painting. And he cast aside all the romanticism and the flamboyance of the 18th century and the early 19th century to be crisp and sharp and to the point, clear, and worldly, and of his time. And the painting shows, it seems to show a very good reading of social distancing. Here are the young men who have left the factory for their lunch hour. The factories are in the background. You can see the smoke coming out of the chimneys. And it's a lovely hot day. They've taken off their shirts. They're sitting on the bank of the River Seine, watching people on boats and wondering if they can perhaps take a swim. Everything seems beautiful and light and airy, but there's a very eerie stillness about the painting. There's something quite uncanny about the lack of communication, the frigidity of the figures. So as we look at it, we're going to try and see why this is, and if we can find something in it that perhaps even relates to the time that we're in now, where we've been made fearful of being with people, we've been kept locked up, and we're not allowed out. And if we do go for a walk, we cross the road to get away from anybody, and we sit a good 2 meters apart. So I thought this painting would very well reflect the kind of a mood that we're in right now. And when you look at it at first, you see this is a wonderful painting, people sitting in the sun, what's not to like. But it's only when you look at it a bit more closely and you see the stillness and the complete lack of communication that each figure seems to be sitting in a bubble. And you feel that the stillness is going to be broken by a massive shout that will ring out any moment now, and the water will vibrate with the sound waves. Is the boy about to shout to the people in the boat? What is the dog looking at? Why are people not looking at each other or talking? Do none of them know each other? Is this a painting about strangers in cities? In the background you can see some very good signs of modern life. There is a railway bridge, and you can see a train going across, and you see the smoke from the smokestacks of the factories at Clichy blowing away in the wind. And yet here in the foreground there seems to be no wind, no movement at all. The painting has a sort of frieze-like quality, in that the figures seem to be arranged in a parade across the painting. And it has the lightness of a fresco. It almost takes us back to the work of Piero della Francesca, when the pigments were mixed with egg tempera, to form tempera, and They were very light. And we completely turned away from the thundering darkness of the late Baroque and all the dark brown bitumen that was de rigueur for decades after that in the salon painting. Well, George Seurat was nothing if not ambitious, and he made this huge painting with the idea that he would submit it to the salon, which he did, but sadly it was rejected. And so then he submitted it to the Impressionist exhibition, which was going to be the 6th and last exhibition of the Impressionist painters. Unfortunately, there too, it was simply too big to be included in the exhibition, and so it was hung in the restaurant, in the refectory, the canteen. George Seurat was a believer in science, and he felt that colours could be mixed by the eye and didn't have to be mixed on the palette or on the canvas. And if you put a green and a blue next door to each other, you might see green. Or if you put a red and a blue, you might see purple. And he arranges his colour in tiny dots. So he is known as a neo-impressionist because he took the fundamental tenets of Impressionism, but he took it very much further, and he turned it into something academic. Remember, he was the only one that had an academic education. There were a lot of theories about colour floating around at that time. There were colour wheels, and I'll probably show them to you on Thursday. And he was very interested in colour as a science. But the consequence of his approach, this pointillism, this tiny dots of colour, was the painting became very frigid. And I think he is the only artist I know who really has no brush work. In fact, there are no brush strokes. You can't really get close to him because there's no emotion in his brushwork at all. He is, in fact, 180 degrees away from Vincent van Gogh. If I showed you even a square inch, you would instantly know it's by Vincent because of the emotion brushworks. So the figures don't look at each other, but they also don't look at us. And George Seurat seems to be a rather closed personality in that he didn't invite us anywhere into the painting. There's no hand gesturing out or little patch of light or anything that could invite us to join these people. Are we meant to be socially distanced from them as they are from each other? Is this perhaps meant to be a comment about the workers, the dignity of labour, which became a very big theme in the 19th century following the French Revolution, led very much by the work of François Millet, who was indeed a peasant, so he had every right to understand what the peasants experienced. And his paintings, particularly the Angelus, which you may know, or the Gleaners, another very famous painting, both in the Musée d'Orsay, these paintings touched the heart of France, and they felt that these paintings represented the nobility of peasants and the cause. So in a sense, Georges Seurat is kind of tapping into that idea as well. But when we look at it again, I feel that he made an enormous effort and somehow failed. The effort can be seen in his small studies. He had no money, so what he would do would be to go around all the cafes and bars and ask for the empty cigar boxes, and then he would take the lids and give them a coat of white paint and paint studies. And these very small works rejoice the heart of nearly every art historian I know, because they are exquisite. The balance, the composition is absolutely faultless. The way that the paint is dispersed, the tiny brushworks that flicker across the canvas a bit like light, sort of flowing down, just literally fluttering across, and the marvelous compositions. So I'll show you the studies. In the studies that he made on this very river bank, there was a horse, there was another boy undressed and about to swim. There were all sorts of things going on that had a more human touch. But he ended up by choosing this particular composition,